A little nervous. I'm really nervous. I've never done this before. I've never done a podcast before. I don't have my glasses. I'm really nervous. I've never done this before. I've never done a podcast before. I'm really nervous. I feel like it didn't mean market it so bad. I'm really nervous. A joke. Way to take across the road.
You dumb motherfucker. Yeah!
Why did the ketchup get... Why did the ketchup get arrested? Why did the ketchup maker get arrested for domestic abuse? Because he beat the tomato. Yeah! What is a potato that gets a sex-change operation? French fries. Yeah!
I'm not impatient. What the fuck is... Hey, Brian.
Ryan, you need to just... This is a song you should listen to. Listen to this song.
It sounds more exciting than what it is.
Let's see how we can lose our next 3 listeners.
Can I tell my goddamn story?
Let's try to work on our people skills.
Can I tell my goddamn story?
Fucking catchy, but it was just different, and their time signatures were different. They weren't doing verse chorus bridge bullshit. They were writing, as they say, math songs in a lot of those songs. And what's funny is you then were also getting into music when you say Ruins and stuff like later, but you were already into what was essentially faster versions of kind of what the Melvins were doing slow, with a lot of just different timing. You know, when you hear bands like Capitalist, 976, and then later Spaz, which was a band that you had a part in, sort of meeting and connecting some of those dudes.
Getting back to the importance of zines at the time, there was an interview with Atmosphere Zine that was out of Newark, Fremont area, Denis Cullen did, where I mentioned that Dan and I had this project, and Chris Dodge, who was up in San Francisco, read that interview and said, "Yo, if you want a bassist, I'd like to join, because I want to do a project like this." And I really got honored that Chris Dodge, wanted to join, and then that was how it was concluded. But again, it's this kind of communication through zines and trading.
Right. Oh yeah. Well, I knew I'm bummed that I didn't know of Melvins earlier. You definitely got into them before me.
But you knew of them, but you weren't interested in them.
I knew of them. I had friends. I eventually, like, I had to check this band out because I had been hearing so much about them, and they were heralded, as kind of a legendary band already at that point in the underground. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know anything about them, so I went and picked up. I went to CD Warehouse in Newark and bought the Ozma CD that had gluey porch treatments on it.
Exactly, yeah.
And I remember it first like grating on me. It was like,
Exactly.
like
It is not attractive. Yeah.
but like you said, something's intriguing, and you got to go back and listen. Like, what the fuck are these guys doing? Like, what is it? You know? And still, I still to this day don't quite like the production of that album, the sound of but what they're playing is just like out of this world, phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I could, I don't even care about that sound quality thing anymore. I just put.
Well, they said it's like Buzzo said. I mean, they recorded it in like a few days. That whole thing. That'd be like cramming at Bart Thurber's House of Faith, like 30 songs in like a couple days or whatever. But they put it together in a fast amount of time. And as Buzzo says, he goes, a good song you can record on anything, and a good song will sound good.
Oh, it'll cut through for sure.
Through any recording, as opposed to you have the highest production value, and if the song ain't shit, it doesn't matter.
That's totally true, man.
And it was funny because that was a band that grew on me mainly through their attitude and also a will to be weird. But they weren't doing it in the way that I could see. There was zero pretension about them. That was mainly, I think, the main thing that intrigued me about them, especially with music being this very, it's like who as with later on in rap world, keep it real, that kind of shit. You got a sense of who was kind of genuinely themselves and who were kind of these, personas and whatnot. And you started, because you saw a lot of bands at the time. There were a lot of bands that came from heavy music underground. Not necessarily, not DIY per se, but a lot. You saw bands in Seattle, bands in LA that were playing for 10 years or more, whether not just the same band, but they were musicians that circulated from scenes playing for a long time. And then they wound up in outfits that then all blew up at that time. Almost like I could hear an album. I remember Smashing Pumpkins. I remember hearing Gish or hearing a song off Gish. I'm like, that's cool, whatever. And as soon as I heard their next album from the first song from Cherub Rock from Siamese Dream, I was like, this band went from being like, oh, that's an okay, like one of those bands that could be on Headbangers Ball in 120 minutes. And I'm like, and I hear Cherub Rock, I'm like, that's a hit song. I knew it instantly. And I remember when they first debuted it, I got Siamese Dream when it was released. And it wasn't that song that sold it. It was Today, when that song Today came out. And that was a hit album. And after seeing Faith No More blow up, even though Real Thing came out in 88 or 89, the Real Thing didn't blow up until the video for Epic blew up in like 1990 or 91. So they really didn't blow up until this song became a hit somehow out of nowhere. And then next thing you know, so that was a hit. Once Chili Peppers, Higher Ground was getting around, the video for it, but Blood Sugar Sex Magic came out, and songs from that album was then putting them over into mainstream territory. So there was another one gone. Soundgarden had not broken in the way that they became until the mid-90s, but they were starting to get there. We had already heard them. I owned Louder Than Love, and I liked it. But they would actually be considered a band that was kind of more in the stoner rock genre before that shit even really came about. But their sound, once Bad Motorfinger came out, that was an awesome album. It was a hit album, and they had some hits on there. I know what's the Outshined was like probably the biggest hit off of that one. But that album still didn't make them so mainstream. It wasn't until the album after that, that had Black Hole Sun, whatever. I don't even know. I didn't get into that album, so I don't remember the name of it. But that was the album that made them much more of a big phenomenon. But that's the thing, is left and right, bands that I liked were then becoming pop culture phenomenons, following in suit with like Nirvana. But I remember the thing I loved about the Melvins. I was like, that's not going to happen with this band. Like, I don't even care that Atlantic signed them. I don't care that Houdini came out and it's on Atlantic. I don't care that it's even a catchier version of the Melvins. That shit is not going to happen with this band. They'll get some new fans, but and I even was worried that they were trying to be like a mainstream band with Houdini. But then they answered that question with Stoner Witch. It's like, oh no, they're just trying to make a good album, sticking to their guns, but they're definitely still have some out there ideas that they're just exploring themselves. And that's the thing I loved about them, was that they do stay true to that work ethic that's been proven time and time again. And they'll lose some old fans, but they'll gain some new ones every single time. And
they were very mysterious to me back then.
Same here. That's what I liked about them too. There wasn't a lot of bullshit.
I always wanted to know, like, what made those guys tick. Like, how do they do this? You know, like, I wanted some inside baseball on them. That's kind of why I like today's environment, where they're on social media and you could kind of, even though it's like, okay, I get it, yeah. Like, you know, you got your few talking points but back then it would have been cool to know what made them tick a little bit more.
But they were the funny thing about it is I would see some interviews with them, and that actually, I hated their interviews, not because I didn't like them talking. It's because I knew Buzzo was a smartass, Dale was the nice guy, and I hated Mark Dutram, who was the bass player, who I could tell was like the biggest ham in being in the Melvins, and he was. I was so grateful when they kicked him out of the band. Even though he's a cool dude now, he's in the Melvins group on Facebook, and he interacts and stuff, and I've even had some interactions with him. And now he's a nice guy. But I remember seeing him even like playing or whatever. He's the one Melvin that I never introduced myself when I had an opportunity to, because I'm like, yeah, the cowboy hat. No, I'm good. I'm all right. And I even remember Buzzo kind of busting his balls at the time when he was like, yeah, that's our bass player who listens to John Coltrane. And that was at a time when Buzzo had no interest in, like, you know, John Coltrane at the time, which I think what was kind of funny is I would try to force myself to listen to jazz at that time. And I still was kind of, to be honest with myself, I'm like, yeah, I don't get it. I don't get it. So I get why he was busting Mark Dutram's butt, because it was like he was trying to be different. It was that pretend. Mark Dutram brought the most pretension into the band than anybody else. But he was a solid bass player in the band. He did some corny things. Like, I remember he would do some corny fills that I was not a fan of. But he also had a key part in, like, he was big in some of the songwriting on Stoner Witch, from what I understand, and Stag, I think, as well. Stag probably being my least favorite Melvins album of all of them, but still I go back to it, and I enjoy shit off it that I didn't remember, which is kind of one of the things I love about them. Once high school was over, I started becoming a huge Melvins head. You were steeped in a lot of sleep and more slower kind of elements, whatever. Keith was hanging around. Keith was way into a band that you guys had seen that I never heard of called Crash Worship, and you guys were then starting to experiment with noise, and that's when we would start to kind of like, because I had played in a band. Again, I played in my first band, Snotlocker, which I am not proud of, but I am prouder of now than at the time.
Hey, I still have the cassette you gave me in high school.
That's one. Believe me, not when I had to go and I transcribe, where I put it all on MP3. You don't know how hard it was to listen to those songs, and I was laughing. My favorite songs were the ones that were the worst songs. That like "Mommy, I'm Turning Into a Girl," which was like a total fuck around song. I fucking love that song because it actually holds up to today's like will to be weird type of shit, versus like the so formulaic aspects of some of the other songs that people remember more. But not only that, it's relevant because people are turning into girls. But at the same time, I was making songs and experimenting, and one of my favorite things that I got to go back and revisit was my second Staplegun. That was my solo band, Staplegun recording, because that was where I first started collaborating with you and Keith in a manner that reflected these common interests that we had. There was a song called "Up in the Mountain Sky" that both you and Keith did vocals on.
We must have done that in your parents' old house in Newark.
That was, yeah, we recorded it in my parents' living room. And there was another song you played based on called Crayons of Doom. That was me sort of like, I enjoyed, one of the things I enjoyed with that particular recording and what became my solo band later, I Think There's Some Damage. I liked making fun of these genres. I liked making fun of music almost more than I liked playing it. Because it's like, as much as I love playing it and stuff, I also think a lot of it is stupid. Or a lot of the cliches about it were so stupid, and I felt that came through. You know, again, that's why I say, looking back on it, it's like, oh, I was basically a comedian this entire fucking time. I just didn't know it. But looking back, when I listen to those recordings and stuff, I can totally hear all my smart ass intentions through the music itself. And yet, we played. When I listened to those songs, I was like, it's easy to hear what then became the first band that I would say I was proud of, which was the band that we created, Snowy Plover, which started with you and Keith making noise that was inspired by your acid trips at Coyote Hills in the Snowy Plover resting area, and then you and me jamming, you learning to play drums to my guitar playing, and then and I jammed with some people, but you not even knowing how to play drums on 2 floor toms and a crash. And us recording it, or I think we recorded it, or we jammed, and that felt more like, it felt better than any of the music that I'd played up to that point. Like I could hear what we were trying to do, and then we just, because that's a strange sense of faith to go on, especially when I was in college. I hated college. I had 2 friends die that year, one of which who was going to try to play bass in our band, my friend Adam, who I lent my Bullhead CD to. Remember, I don't know if you remember him. You met him, but he was, or no, maybe you didn't. He was a guy that played bass. I met him in college. He was a guy I bought weed off of. And he was very excited, and I introduced him to the Melvins, and he fucking loved the Melvins. And because he was a big Nirvana head. And I said, well, if you like Nirvana, check out this band. And he fucking loved the Melvins. And I lent him Bullhead. And that was where I started to feel that my Bullhead CDs were cursed, because every one I've had has disappeared into the ethos, or the ether. But he borrowed it, and he died on a Christmas vacation. And but we kept trying to jam during that entire year.
I would go out to Santa Cruz, and we would go in and set up some room in the school.
Yeah, we'd go to the jam room, and oddly enough, with zero fucking, zero thought put into it, just sort of following my instincts on, like, if I have to live a life that I don't want to live, I might as well do something that I really would like to do. And oddly enough, going on some sort of strange faith was this creativity that we would find jamming with each other. Based on a lot of these influences. Yes, kind of, the drugs obviously were there too, but it was a very inspired time creatively, and still proud of the output that I heard, that especially when I'm going back and putting these things into MP3s and listening to it, just being like, yeah, this, it makes perfect sense why it was totally, I wasn't in any place to sort of make this a workable thing beyond just, the jam room and the handful of gigs we were able to pull off. But, that just, comes with experience later on playing in live bands. But still remembering very fondly the joy of, like, recording, even being on acid and recording, or not even always being on acid, but just jamming, thinking every idea we had was brilliant. And just putting things together, and also being influenced by a lot of different stuff that then got embedded in my brain. Bands like Zenigeva, Today Is the Day, a lot of bands I still listen to this very day. Ruins, which you guys introduced me to. One album that I remember you introducing me to, I had zero interest in Jimi Hendrix, none. And but the album that really did introduce me to Jimi Hendrix was when you played me Band of Gypsies, and that was still a huge influence on me.
I listened to that the other day. And
it's it's an amazing album that, and I think it had a lot to do with sort of the humility of the circumstances, because Hendrix was, everybody touts him as God and yada yada and all this shit, and you hear it and like, the songs are catchy, they hold up, they're from the 60s, whatever the fuck, okay, you know, and it's almost annoying. But then when you play Band of Gypsies, you're not just hearing Hendrix. I mean, it allowed me to then listen to Hendrix in a context that I enjoyed, and then I went back and listened to Hendrix in that other context, and I could appreciate the other players that were really supporting, that were fucking awesome musicians on their own, but kind of get overlooked.
The time, if you consider the time, like with the Vietnam War going on, and he even says a shout out to you know, his brothers in Vietnam. I don't know. There's just a heaviness, a weight to it.
When Miles Davis says, you know, that goddamn machine gun gets him, you know, that because in interviews he said time and time again that Miles Davis, like what music gets you, you know, whatever that you know moves you, whatever, and Machine Gun haunted him as a musician, and it was a big influence on his playing, when he changed up a lot of players, because he also then had his relationship with Betty Davis, who I think also introduced him to Jimi Hendrix. They might even be Eskimo brothers. I think they both banged Betty Davis. So she made good music herself as well. But then, but there was just that time of like, there was a lot more. Earth got into another band called Earth, which has their ties to the Melvins and Nirvana and all of that. I remember going over your house the day that we learned that Nirvana, or that Kurt Cobain died, and I remember we not even breaking a sweat, just sort of already gallows humor. I don't even remember exactly what was said, but like
I learned. So I didn't care about Nirvana.
Yeah.
When I was like deeply steeped into death metal.
Yeah, you're definitely in the heavier end of the spectrum.
On a hit, and I was like, yeah, I already knew about those guys, and
weren't impressed.
You know? Yeah, and I didn't care about Nirvana at all, and didn't like them and then when I went over to Richie's house, and his brother opens the door, and he's all, Kurt Cobain is dead, and I laughed. I fucking laughed, and then, but the weirdest thing is, from that point on, I have loved Nirvana. Yeah. And I love Nirvana. I just like every time I hear him, and that's the thing is, for me, every time I hate something, I end up loving it. And that was the first time I kind of learned that.
It was, I think I don't remember your exact quote, but I remember when we discussed it, your first thing I think you said something like, probably the best thing for their band, or something to that extent. Something of like, it probably will improve. Like it had something to do with it'll probably improve something about them.
So we were gallows humor, huh? That's funny.
It was to some extent. Like we were both like, because I think I liked Nirvana. I was fortunate enough I got to see them play live earnestly. Because I got to see it at the end of 91, 92. Me and Amit went to see. We saw Pearl Jam, Nirvana, and Red Hot Chili Peppers when they were all breaking. That was when they were the everything was starting to break thanks to MTV. Mm-hmm. And that was when you started to see like that bridge of certain bands that were, that we felt some sense of ownership from, like metal and punk or whatever. They were starting to get into mainstream, and labels were aware of it too. So Sonic Youth was one of those bands after Nirvana broke. There's others. I mean, definitely, like I mentioned, Smashing Pumpkins, the Seattle bands, Alice in Chains, and all that shit. But there was still there was one band that came from Earache that I am shocked because that was Earache's pitch when Nirvana broke. They were hoping this band would kind of get in on some of this, and that was Fudge Tunnel. Mm-hmm. And I fucking love Fudge Tunnel.
Yeah, we were into that.
Yeah, and that was I got your Fudge Tunnel shirt. We did a trade because you wouldn't wear your Fudge Tunnel shirt anymore. You lost interest, and it's in storage at Vic's somewhere. But I still have my my Fudge Tunnel shirt that's like, and then I realized later, I'm like, oh yeah, this is probably a shirt you don't want to wear to Christmas or something. Yeah, it's pretty fucked up. But so anyways, but then in the end, we ended up playing in several bands through not just Snowy Plover. Then, that pretty much began what embarked our 20s and 30s playing in a variety of different bands throughout the years that both, some together, others apart. From, as far as the lineage of those, I know. So we had once Snowy Plover, you moved to Humboldt. So did Dan, who later, because Keith, however, Keith left Snowy Plover, either he quit, we kicked him out, it was really a mutual, like, okay, you're going to go over there now. And Dan joined the band. We had one jam where all four of us were together. I do remember that. And it was a great jam.
One of Keith's workplaces or something, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we spent the day out in Calaveras, and then we came back afterwards and we jammed. I was on acid that day. You guys didn't drop acid. I did.
That's kind of how I remember Snowy Plover. Is every time we did something, we didn't do it small. It was a big thing, We all jammed together. It was huge. We loaded everything in. The thing, it's just crazy madness,
Yeah, it was an event. Robbie Barr was with us, I believe, when we jammed, and he was blown away by hearing what he heard in that little spot. I remember that.
The only time we jammed together, huh?
Yeah, the one time then, and then we, until 2008 when we did the reunion one. Snowy Plover, and then you moved up north. You played in bands ranging from there was Happy Go Lucky. Were you in Happy Go Lucky?
Which turned into Hyperbole.
Hyperbole, I do that, but Happy Go Lucky was the first name, then Hyperbole, and then evolved into Uzmeko. I know Uzmeko.
No, so let's see. We did Happy Go Lucky was just kind of like a placeholder name, and then we did for Hyperbole. We did a while with our friend Andy.
Yeah.
And then we broke up. That split up, and that's when I started Candy Muscle with Rob, with his other band.
Were you in Uzmeko though, or was Dan?
We didn't do Uzmeko until later.
Later, okay.
Yeah, then we got together with Tommy and this guy Rob, and
from the Vista and
Marita. Yeah.
Because then I once Snowy Plover was gone, I was still stuck in Newark. And now I'm jamming with the kids that were all hanging out at Rayleigh's and saw one or two of our local shows, and we would even play shows with them or played a couple shows with them. And that was the whole generation that had a band called Probation, which you had the demo of. And I remember because
That's Will and Jim.
That's Will and Jim, and we remembered Will primarily from a party where he got peed on. Where it was, I still remember it distinctly. This is not a fond memory for Will, and I don't like bringing it up to him. But Will had one beer, was acting like he was drunk, and kept asking us if we liked Nirvana. And this was at the time where we were just like, yeah, Nirvana, great band, whatever. We're being sarcastic assholes. As soon as he got peed on, he goes, guys, it's raining. And he's trying to tell us it's raining. He goes, wait a minute, what? Are you peeing on me? And he yells, he goes, I got pee on me! And his first thought is to go in the house and to roll himself all over dude's couch because dude was laughing at him, and which was the best fucking revenge for anything like that. Oh yeah, no, it was great. Like, as soon as that went down, we were like, all right, that's our cue to leave, because we were just like, this party's getting into that fucking ugly territory that we didn't really care for. We went to go drink and smoke weed, maybe, or not even drink, really. We weren't even drinkers. We were more potheads, acid heads or whatever. But so then that was where I remember him. And then when you showed me the demo of Probation, I remember you were like, here, check this out, or I got something to play for you. And you played it, and I was like, this sounds pretty cool. And you're like, this is Will. This is Will's band. And I'm like, Will. And you reminded him, like, that's Will? Holy shit. Like, because
that Probation is good. I listened
It is good. No, it's very good. And because that ended up evolving into their band, Radioactive Bastard, which, that was pretty much the same band, with, I think maybe a minor change in members here or there, but they played a lot of the same songs. And then I ended up jamming with them over at Albie's house from time to time, because I'd hang out with them, smoke weed, whatever. I was kind of drifting in, dead-end jobs after I dropped out of college. And I remember I was working at Kinko's and working the graveyard shift. I got introduced. I met this one guy. I've only played in 2 cover bands in my life. The first one I played in was a senior year in high school with a guy I worked with at Stuffed Pizza. And they weren't bad musicians, but I remember just the disgust that I felt playing in a cover band based on the way that, like, because every member of that band, like, Snotlocker made me feel cooler than this band ever could be. Because at least we were original. That's all I felt like. It's like we were original and we were ourselves. I can honestly say that. We made a demo. We weren't fucking, like, we were trying to do something original. These guys, they couldn't even understand playing a cover in a different style. Like, they had to play it and make it sound like, or try to make it sound like the recording. And each one of them, the song they wanted to contribute reflected the band that they looked like they were the most into. So there was a guy who wanted to play a Smashing Pumpkins song. He looked like James Heehaw from Smashing Pumpkins. There was the drummer. He suggested a Pearl Jam song. He looks like he could be in Pearl Jam. The singer, I forget. They selected some other songs that weren't bad that I actually like One Faith No More song, and I contributed The Wizard by Black Sabbath, which I had to give credit to the front man, who was a jock-looking dude, who was the coolest guy in the band because he totally broke my expectations. He was a jock. He had a Letterman jacket, and yet he did great vocals, and he did the harmonica for the Wizard. So I was like, he's cool. And they had a bass player who was ahead of his time because he looked like he would be into Creed. And he had the whole shaved side of the head thing, and would always have his shirt off to show off his muscles and shit. And it was so embarrassing to be a part of. And that band, and then later, after Snowy Plover was gone, and I'm jamming with the Radioactive Bastard guys, I met this guy JoJo who was playing. I met him he was making copies of his CD or something, and we got to talking, and he was like, he goes, "Oh, you play music?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can play guitar, bass." Where he goes, "Well, I need a bass player. Yeah, give me your number, whatever." So I'm like, "All right, whatever." And I'm just like, mild curiosity. So I end up getting roped into this ska punk band. I'm playing Rancid covers and whatever bands I've never listened to. and I, not only that, I couldn't stand their music, but I just took it as a challenge of like, let me see if I can play this and whatever. And not only could I play it, but I played it better than the rest of the other band that had there was zero inspiration behind this. This was all JoJo, who was basically a rock star in his own mind. And he was very uninspiring to the other bandmates that were all just his friends and whatnot. They were big in the Filipino community because that's basically who we played to. We did get to play. We played at Daly City High School. We were on a show with the Misanthropists, if you remember that band. We played a show with them because they were playing. And I remember, like, that's a cool band right there. And I ended up going there. I remember a girl I was dating at the time. She helped me carry my amp to the backstage for this fucking awful show. And here I am. I'm in my early 20s too, and girls gave me their number. Like some underage fucking high school girls were like trying to give me their number. The only two times I've ever had girls give me their number was after these fucking awful cover bands, and that's what made me lose respect for any of the sex, drugs, rock and roll. And I'm like, no, it's either play music you like, or you liking it, and don't give a shit about that shit, or just don't bother, because women have horrible taste. And the girl I was dating, she could care less I was playing in a band. But then after that, that's what Radioactive Bastard ended up evolving into what became Tonopah, which I like to call Snowy Plover Part 2, which are like the way station, because that was the band, and I love how Paul from Godstomper called it, we were the Grand Funk Railroad of hardcore, because we played, we had and he's exactly right when he said it this way. During the time of Tonopah, we've played shows with as few as 3 members, and we played shows with as many as 8 members. And it all just depended. We played with 2 drummers at one time. Like, we had Albie and Jeff playing drums at a show that we did with Antagony out at the Danville Grange or whatever. We got to play out there. And we had, I think, we had so many fucking members on that show. And my favorite show there's 2 actually favorite shows I have with Tonopah was one was 3 of us, I was playing drums actually. I filled in for Jeff. Jeff couldn't do this one gig. I could play drum. I knew our songs well enough, and I had drums down well enough to where I felt confident. I'm like, I could play our songs, and that's how I knew our music was pretty dumb. But we ended up. It was Jim and Will playing just two guitars. We had no bass. They played two guitars. It was at some gymnasium or something in Oakland, and the lighting was fucking awesome. It was dark. We just had lights that were floor lights, and so it was very mood. The mood was perfect, and it was just two blaring guitars and me on drum. Zenigeva. I mean, basically Zenigeva, and we played the fuck out of it. Huh?
Wish you had a recording of that.
I do too, because I remember that set. Like, we felt good after. Like, we felt badass. And so we played that show. And there were a lot of other shows that I mean, because we took Tonopop to Humboldt a couple times with different lineups, and then my other favorite show was the one that we did with a completely different lineup. This was when I was again on drums, because our first drummer was Jeff Ortega, amazing drummer, but the band was deemed too evil for him to continue. From his Christian parents, so they told him he had to quit. Then Albie joined the band, and Albie was a good drummer, but he also was primarily a guitar player and whatnot. I filled in at times when like either they couldn't show up or whatever, because I could hold my own, but I didn't want to be the drummer. So Albie was our drummer for a good little while for the second recording that we did, and then he quit. I forget what the reason was behind that. So then I filled in during the last leg of Tonopah, and that was when the two guys who would eventually form Woozor with me. That was when Nate and Red joined the band. Nate was our noisician. He went by the Wizard, and he would have his keyboard and like other noise to provide. Red played bass, and the thing was Will was our only guitar player. Jim had quit the band, so it was, Jim couldn't make it to the show, or he might have quit. I don't know. Like, we always, again, rotating members, but it was Will on guitar, me on drums, Red on bass, Nate doing noise, and Keith was doing vocals with us at the time, because that was where people met Keith's dad when we did a show down in Bakersfield. We did Jerry's Pizza in Bakersfield, well-known haunt, and we played in the basement there with Godstomper. And we had a great show that I remember it sounded really good. It felt really good. We had a good time. We stayed the night down there. But for whatever reason, Will did not like being in a band with Red, or that he just looked down on Red for some, and that had to do with the age thing and whatever, which I thought was weird, because I always felt that like people looked down on Will at times. So I always used to tell Will, I'm like, why are you shouldn't be looking down on anybody, man. Like, just enjoy. You got a band, he can play, And then I also remember Red told me in a parking lot at Rayleigh's when Tonopah was at its height, I guess. He goes, Dave, Nate and I are starting a band. It's going to be me on drums, Nate playing guitar, and we want you to play bass. And I don't even know if I think they might have had the name already. And like you said, it's going to be called Woozor or something like that. And I just remember thinking like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever. I don't give a fuck. And
I always thought Woozor was your brainchild.
No, Woozor was Nate. It was Nate's idea, and him and Red worked. No, I joined. It was Nate and Red wanted to start a band. Nate already had jammed with Eric Alberson in a band called God Awful that I fucking loved, and it was where I learned Nate's style on guitar, which was he had a really, like, he knew how to play, but he had also like a strength. It was my favorite time ever watching him perform. We played the Fatty Mocha in Merced, and him and Eric opened for Radioactive Bastard. I was filling in on guitar in Radioactive Bastard, and they blew me away, and they ended up like alienating everybody else there, and I thought it was like one of my favorite sets I had seen by a band that I knew, and that's when I learned that Eric could play drums too. Like, Eric knew how to play.
I never heard that.
Yeah, no, they weren't around. That was like one of the only shows they ever played, and I fucking loved it. So I knew Nate could play, and I loved how he played. And then, then Red didn't know how to play drums. Red was going to learn how to play drums. That was his. So when he's like 5 years younger than me, and he, we're hanging out, and he's like 17 going on 18, like, Dave, we're gonna start a band. I'm gonna play drums. Nate's gonna play guitar. We want you to play. It's like a wishful thinking band, and I'm like, yeah, sure, we'll do it, whatever. So then, cut to about almost a year later, Tonopah ends up kind of completely biting the dust after we played in the last line of Will just didn't want to play with this new lineup anymore. He was living with Keith at the time, and then I end up working. I was working at City of Fremont at the time. This is like 1998, I want to say. 98 or 99. I'm working at City of Fremont. I ended up getting jobs for Nate and Red at City of Fremont. So we're working that summer, or that spring into that summer, and they used to invite me over to Nate's house to come jam, and which was kind of weird because I'm in my early 20s. I'm 22, going on 23. I'm being invited over to these 18-year-olds, to the 18-year-old parents' place. The young adult coming in, the young brown adult in a double ginger fucking lineup of a band. So I walk in, and and they're playing in Nate's bedroom, which he had a nice sized bedroom, oddly enough. We're playing through practice amps, so it's like I'm not expecting anything to be that inspiring. And Nate and Red's learning how to play the drums, and they showed me some songs, and I would jam along, and it would sound kind of, it was really just like, yeah, I got nothing else better to do. I might as well jam with these guys, and whatever. It's just have fun as we can. And they were cool guys. Like for guys that were 5 years my junior, I thought they were cool kids. And I also, just for whatever reason, I couldn't grab. Everybody that was my age was gone, and here I was. I'm now the older loser. So
they were that young.
Yeah, they were. No, they're 5 years young, 4 to 5 years. And then what ended up happening was one day we were jamming, and we played a few times, but we all clicked on one of our renditions of Winter of '59, which is one of my favorite songs that Nate has ever written. And because we played it before, but this is the first time that we played it, and we all felt it, and we all got lightheaded. We got that lightheaded rush from it, and we all looked at each other and we're like, holy shit, that worked. And we all knew it, and we're like, there might be something here after all, because we'd felt it in other. We kind of sensed these things. It was an instinct, and that was when we knew, hey, we might be onto something, and just in terms of jamming, and that again, it just the whole formula that I found, and it's it was a formula to a fault, is that I didn't like being in bands with people that I wasn't friends with, and which is kind of strange, because in the end, if you want to make a band really work, it's there does need to be friendship. Hell, only goes so far, but there needs to be a level of it's not conscious. It's really a certain synchronicity that you have with people to work. There is a friendship, there's a bond, there's a familial. It's like a marriage with your bandmates, but there's a synchronicity in a thing that has to go along in terms of work, in terms of going in strange environments and responding to those strange environments, and kind of an all for one for all type of thing. And that was the thing, is I just knew I liked these guys. Let's see what happens. And we ended up making some really cool music, some music I'm very proud of, that I enjoy listening to. As my favorite bands that I've been in over the years, Woozor is probably the one that I listen to the most, only because it encompasses, because Woozor was heavily inspired too, also by Snowy Plover. There was a lineage of influence from Snowy Plover into Tonopah that then led to Woozor, and they all have O's in the name, which I always like. So, and I always like to keep that. I was trying to keep that kind of. That was the thing I liked about Kindred's influence, Stinkweed from the West Bay Doomryderz. I was conscious of that then, because I had listened to Plutocracy by that time, I knew of some other West Bay elements, but Plutocracy introduced me to No Less and some other bands, because some of those guys were into those bands. And I started to learn who Stinkweed was, Kindred. And as I then, met Dan Lactose and started becoming more familiar with the West Bay and all that, and being introduced to that music, I saw the DNA of Kindred's influence in almost everything that like the West Bay Doomryder, fucking 650, that whole music scene.
He's king.
His level of influence, it's in everything. Even the stuff that he's not in, with players that he jammed with, has that DNA. And like, there's something about the way their changes, their style, their, it's like I could hear one of their bands and be like, this is Doomryder. Like I know it's them. Like they have like a certain, there's a riff that almost is like in every one of those bands. Or like I know that Thomas is in the band, or I know that Snowman's in the band, or whatever. Like they're all, it all goes, and you can even almost hear it in Immortal Fate as well. So and it's strange. So I knew that I liked that mythology in my own head, and was trying to like kind of do that with once Woozor broke up into like, I think there's some damage and whatever. But and then you ended up because then we reconnected somewhat when I remember kind of doing, once Tonopah was gone, Woozor got to do some shows with you guys, where we got to play up in Humboldt while you guys were still living up there. And then I was doing my one-man band as well, because we also released the Candy Muscle 7-inch on my label during Woozor. That's right, Woozor and Candy Muscle played a lot together, or a few times.
And we would always get together and jam whenever we were around. Yeah.
We would make recordings, just some like one-off recordings of our ramblings and our weird stuff.
And we would play Plover tunes sometimes.
Yeah, we would always. That's the thing about it, is they've always been in. That's the thing I always loved about the songs of all of the bands. Like if Eric and I were to get back together and around some instruments, I know we could hash out at least like a couple easy Bad Touch songs. When we've gotten together, like, if we got around some instruments, we could easily hash out, It Had to Happen to Ted, or Throw to God.
I always wanted to jam, because I'd be like, oh, Dave, I'm way better on drums now. I can play this shit way better now. Let's jam this song.
Yeah. And so it's just one of those things. But yeah, I always say it's like all of that input is then jamming in the Bug Pedals. The Bug Pedals being, your most Melvins-ish band, because you went through I don't know how many bass players, but it was always a good sounding band with a lot of catchiness to it. You were in another band, Shaking Hands. Is that another band?
Yeah, with the Pilot Brothers.
Yeah, that's right. Kind of remember
indie rock type of stuff.
That's right. Yeah. And trying to remember what else you played in.
Yeah. Jeez. I don't know. I think we probably covered most of them.
Well,
after Bug Pedals disintegrated, Will and I got together with Marta and Pete Kopp.
That's right.
And we did Street Score for a while.
Street Score. That's right. Because we didn't play a show with you, but we would cross paths with Will's. Like when Bad Touch started, that was when we got to play like Will's first fest that he was doing.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And but that was when he was still, I think, because then Will joined Bug Pedals as well. Because I remember I got into Funeral Shock 2002. That's when we started Funeral Shock with all the DIY guys. And then I made them come up and play and stay with you at Humboldt, so that way you can reconnect with all the DIY people that you kind of lost touch with. And that was like a big, people's minds blowing. That's why I'm looking through your records as you're showing certain records, and I'm learning which ones you got. I was like, oh yeah, Ballsack fucking gave you Wastoid when we were up there and shit.
Yeah.
And so, but there was Funeral Shock, and then that was also around the time that then Daryl and Ben wanted to jam, and we were doing like a Weekend Warrior thing. That then over time, after Ben moved to England for 6 months, and Daryl and I didn't know what to do. And I ended up telling Daryl to go play, after I heard him play acoustically. He ended up going on his own, playing at open mics acoustically and developing his performance chops. and then we ended up forming DAC, which was basically the acoustic pop punk kind of shit that he was doing, which was totally unlike anything that I had done. But then bridges the giant connection between Snotlocker, my first band, and those friends, you know, going all there, but playing completely different songs. We only played one song from Snotlocker, and that was Country Music Killed My Dog, and we didn't do it all that often. We played it here and there. But that, and then after that, and meanwhile, all during that time, I had a one-man band that was like an experimental thing that I would collaborate with people called I Think There's Some Damage, which was I definitely believed in, because there was the thing I love about that idea was that it started with the drum machine. It's like, okay, if I have no other fucking band, at least I can still have a band, and I still have the ability. After seeing the Thrones play, seeing Joe Preston pull it off, I'm like, I can do this. I know I can do this, and doing it in that manner. But then realizing also, it's once the drum machine broke, really, that I'm like, I still want to be able to do this, but how can I do this without the drum machine? I'm like, I jam with so many different drummers.
Yeah, that's right.
And got so accustomed to like playing, like I prided myself on, I could bring out the jam band drummer in any drummer. And it's true. I've watched them all light up too. And some people can't even play drums, and I've been able to pull it off with them playing drums. At least one did not know how to play drums, and I still managed to pull it off. And then, unfortunately, I let in on the audience that he didn't know how to play drums. And I said, "You lied. You can't play the drums." And then, because the audience was into it until they learned he couldn't play the drums, and then they were like, "Oh, this is bullshit. We're not wasting our time with this." And but it's a weird thing.
Yeah, you were bringing drummers in for a while there.
I would rotate different drummers into just based on who was available and who was willing to do a gig.
I got to do one time, I think.
You jammed in on one of the bigger recording sessions, which was the Old Dirty Bastard Wu-Tang tribute at my house in Foster City, which there was the all-day barbecue, because and this was like a combination of like everything that you know, and this I felt like such a director for the first time of like the mad orchestra of all of probably my biggest, like all of my friends that span almost all of this length of time of my music, because we had you, Keith, Dan Lactose on Noise, we had Nate from Woozor. We had, then coming over, we had Eric Alberson, aka Crazy Eric, and Dave Dilla, who was our buddy, who was sort of like a mascot in Woozor. He was like our buddy that would always go with us to shows and stuff. And we had this all-day barbecue, and we would go eat, and then we'd go jam, and we'd go eat, we'd go jam, and we were just doing improvised fucking noise jams. That were all, you didn't know it, but were mostly inspired by my love of Wu-Tang. So, yeah.
That was in the garage where we were playing, right?
Yeah. Bud Pedals would jam there too from time to time. So during that time.
And then I think you did that on the radio too.
I've done a few of them on the radio. You jammed one with me on the radio as well, because I know we did Snowy Plover on the radio, but I'm not sure if I remember you jamming with us on a radio one that I think was a split between, we did Damage with Dan, and then also we did some Snowy Plover songs at the end. Yeah. Yeah, because there was like a partial Snowy Plover one, because I remember doing songs with Dan that both with him doing noise, and I think you were on drums, and I also did him on noise with Phil. This dude Phil, who plays Swamp Witch today, but he was a guy who came from bands in the South Bay and stuff. He could play every instrument as well. So, but yeah. So, and that's what then brought us to the point, I guess, of where now we just don't play music.
We sure don't.
But yeah, I'm trying to wrap it up because we've been talking for 2 hours, and I know I'm gonna have to get the fuck out of this, or maybe.
Well, I think one of my favorite bands of yours was Funeral Shock.
Well, yeah, I mean the Players I think has a lot to do with those, you know, because you were into a lot of the heavy stuff that or the fast stuff that they were playing.
Yeah, well, just to listen to today, Woozor and Funeral Shock, I think, are some hitters.
Yeah, I pretty much like everything that everybody I know has produced. I can't say like, you know, I mean, I probably don't listen to Shaking Hands or whatever, but I love like Candy Muscle, one of the most original bands I ever heard, and you were part of, it's a duo, you know, and as much as, you know, Rob was Rob, you know, rest in peace, Rob, what's his last name? Reardon,
yeah.
Yeah, he was truly an original, you know, creative guy, but you were the other half of that. Like you were, you know, and that was, I remember hearing this and like, you're playing drums? Holy shit. Because it was complex stuff. It wasn't like easy. It didn't sound easy. So, you know.
I listen to that, all I hear is slop.
Yeah, you may think so, but I mean, it's stuff that I, you know, I remember I wouldn't have put out a record, you know, being that just doing DIY records. You know, it's one of the records that, yeah, I'm very proud of, and just, you know, looking back on it, being like, oh shit, you know, and it's sad that, you know, when Rob couldn't, you know, beat addiction,
yeah.
You know, back on that, but yeah, and then, you know, because I hear a lot of other, I still to this day, I'll listen to bands that we played with, or I mean, I might hear them or whatever. They don't hold up, or they don't. There's just. I don't know if it's mainly just my personal experience or whatever, but I'll find Tonopod to be more worth revisiting than some of the bands that we played with around those times that were kind of more of the time that I don't, you know. I don't really, I don't revisit and think like, oh, this is still good. It's like, oh yeah, I remember this band.
So you don't listen to a lot of Bud Court then, huh?
Never.
You know, Plover was a special thing, I think, you know?
Very much. Set a standard.
Too bad we didn't get out there and play gigs with more like the underground scene and stuff, but...
I think they would have embraced us. I think they definitely would have embraced us more so, but I always remember... It's when I think of my recovery term, you are where you're supposed to be, which means also that you're not where you're not supposed to be. And that's kind of when I look back on it, I'm like, the thing I'm like, there is no way with knowing the egos of the band, that I feel like that would have done us any good. All it would have done was probably broken us up sooner, in many respects. Because just knowing Keith, knowing, I mean, you and I were more of like the musical core of things, but even we had our differences at times. We butt heads. Dan was Dan, you know, and Dan was always kind of, you know, his own little elusive, you know, I mean, was listening to Paula Cole, still likes Paula Cole, you know.
I went to Lilith Fair with Dan.
Oh, no doubt. That's right. I remember. Yeah, he was the Lilith Fair guy. He was, you know, he was the woke before woke motherfucker, but Dan also being like the guy that was intriguing. He was like, you know, as much as I thought I was into Godflesh, he was way more into Justin Broderick's. He introduced me to like the bands like Bug and Techno Animal that Broderick was doing. You know, I know you played me Ice. Well, I got into Yesu later, but Dan was the one who Dan Lactose put me onto Yesu. Just because he knew how much I like Godflesh, and he was like, dude, have you heard Yesu? Or I think we called it Jesu, because we didn't know it was Yesu yet. You know, it took Eugene from Oxbow schooling us on, you know, when you're a band on Hydra Head Records, you know how every band's pronounced on that fucking layer. So, yeah. But it's a strange, man, because like all the, you know, just the fact that there is that lineage of music that I feel like, yeah, you know what? No one will know. I almost feel like the movie, the Gangs and Gangs of New York, that they were all there. That was my life. There were all these bands that I was part of, all these that were, you know, kind of part of these fringe scenes and whatnot. And then after I die, they will be just forgotten in the sands of fucking local time, you know. And you know, it's like, you know, if anything, it was funny. I sold a bunch of records to a guy that I know who actually played in bands with Wyatt at one point, I don't think he was in Bud Court, but he was in something with Wyatt. And I sold him a bin of records, and I gave him, because I was like, I'm in a generous mood, and he paid me more than I thought the records were worth. I gave him 7 inches from various extras I have from my, from my own bands. And I was like, here, man, if you want, these are some bands I was into. And he goes, oh, cool, whatever, da-da-da, something. I just remember being not impressed one bit of like I'm like I was so tempted to like grab him back, and I'm like, maybe he's just he's just a little maybe too overwhelmed, So, but I'm sure he might have given him a spin or two. So who knows? But thank you very much for taking the time to do this, and always good bullshitting with you. And
it was nice going down memory lane with you.
With these particular, this being the music aspect, there's nobody, there's no closer brother I have to music than you. So
sure, right on, man.
Right on, man. Say hi to the family. Wish everybody well. Give the kids a hug, and say hi to Mo for me. And have a good day, man.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
I mean, you know what I mean? You know what I say? He says he's mean. You know what I mean? Mean. You know what I mean? I say what I mean. That's true. I mean what I say. I'm so mean I had to train my beat myself up. I put my nose, I put my hand, I wrestle myself to the ground. That's how mean. You know what I mean? I'm practically lost. And it took me all night. And I give it all right. Because I'm so mean. I'm mean. You know what I mean? I jump myself to death and broke the shelf and rolled out. Then I snap my condom and do it across the fucking rain. I'm mean. I mean what I say. You know what I mean? I'm meaner than spit. I'm meaner than shit. I'm meaner than mean. I'm mean.
Andrew Pinion here, doing my old shave for the MeanDave's podcast. And sometimes my voice gets deeper because, particularly when I shave, it brings the animal out of me. It's ridiculous. You don't need to review everything. You don't have to put everything in a scale. This is a 4.0 razor. This is a 4-star and 4-star razor. Shaving cream is 1 star and 4 stars. No one cares about Capri Suns. Three stars out of 4 stars. That argument is 4 stars out of 4 stars. Your judgments don't define anything. They just define you needing to do that. But you're wrong.
No one cares about Capri Suns. Your judgments don't define anything. They just define you needing to do that.